Today we're going to talk all about one of the most important features of bagpipe music, and that is repeats. Bagpipe music is very rhythmic and also very structured. Most bagpipe tunes have musical phrases and parts that are played more than once, sometimes several times. But the repeating patterns can change, and the way that bagpipe sheet music is written is not always that clear, which can make it really hard to follow and understand exactly what you're supposed to play. In today's video, you're going to learn everything about how to correctly read, understand, and play all of the different types of repeats in bagpipe tunes. We'll look at several examples of tunes and the different ways that tunes repeat and the different ways that the music can be written. By the end of this video, you'll have a complete understanding of repeats in bagpipe tunes, so you'll be able to read and play your tunes with confidence. Stick around, you're going to love this video. Welcome to bagpipelessons.com, where you'll find the inspiration and knowledge to fulfill your piping dreams. Today I want to take a few minutes to talk about the repeat symbol. So we see a lot of these in pipe music at the end of a part, and these two little dots there, it means to go back and repeat that part. If you look at all of our pipe tunes, all the pipe tunes that have ever been written, 99% of them or more probably fit into a basic pattern, which is 2 parts or 4 parts. Sometimes you get 6, but it's usually 2 or 4 parts, and you repeat the parts, and each part is going to be 8 bars. Again, not all tunes, but almost all of them. So if we take a look here, tune that most pipers know, Green Hills, this is a 3/4, and if you look, we have, this is a very common pattern that we see almost all the time, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 8 bars in the first part, 8 bars in the second part, and the parts are repeated. So we know that because at the end of this 8th bar, there's our little repeat symbol, our 2 dots, and that means we go back here to the beginning. Often you'll see the 2 dots at the beginning, which shows you the start of that part. So you're going to play these 2 lines, play them again, and then second part, same thing. Play these 2 lines, play them again. And that's the whole tune. So just to review what I said at the very beginning here, almost all of our tunes fit this pattern, which is 8 bars per part, some number of 2 or 4, or sometimes 6 parts. Occasionally we get 3-parted tunes, but pretty rare. Now there's a couple exceptions to the rule about repeating parts, and that is Strathspeys and reels and 4/4 marches. For some reason, those 3, Strathspeys, reels, and 4/4s, we don't repeat. So on those tunes we'll have same thing, 8 bars per part, but straight through, no repeats. So here's another tune, the brown-haired Maiden, common 2/4 march that a lot of us know. So here's our first part. Again, we have our repeat marks. So we're going to play line 1, line 2, line 1, line 2, then we go on to the second part. If you look at the second part, no repeats here. So what this is you would play straight through. You just play straight through 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, and then you're done. Well, why is that? Why did they write out all 4 lines in full instead of the same 2 lines played twice? Well, it's because there's a difference here, and actually the way the tune is written is that if you look, it's something a little bit different here in this last line. But that's really it, is that this line here is slightly different. So if we number our lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When you actually play the tune, you're going to play line 1, and then line 2, then line 1, and then line 2 because of the repeat, and then we're going to play 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if you know this tune, if you've played it before, if you just kind of study it, what you'll see is that line 3 and line 5 are the same. So if we, instead of labeling that 5, label that 3, now we have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 6. So sometimes you'll see a tune like this written out in full, but they can also do what they call a second ending, which is what we have here. So instead of writing out, so again, if we number them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, part 1 is going to be 1, 2, 1, 2. Part 2 is going to be 3, 4, 3, 5. Let's go back and look at that. So we play our first part, play it again. Then we do our second part. Start here. Now we go to here. What is this number 1 with this bracket? This means first time. So the first time we play this part, go here, and then we play the first time. Then we go back to the beginning, and we play this again. But we can't play first time, because this means you only get to play it the first time only. So then we're going to jump down here, which is the number 2, which means the second time. So first time is line 3, 4. Second time is line 3 and 5, which is the exact same thing that we had on this other one. This is no longer line 6, it's line 5. So 3, 4, 3, 5, 3, 4, 3, 5. All we've done is in this version, they've saved a little bit of space by not writing out our line 3 twice. That makes sense? So very common in piping, what we have is repeats, but then there'll be what they call a second ending. And that happens all over the place in pipe tunes. Let's move on. Here we have an amazing jig, one of the best, Biddy from Sligo. Great tune. Now let's take a look here. Here's our first part. There's repeat marks there. So we're going to play our first part and then repeat it. Here's our second part. Play these 2 lines and then repeat it. Now if we look at our third part, no repeats anywhere. So our whole third part is here. And then our whole fourth part is here. So it doesn't mean that it's twice as long. In fact, the third and fourth part are exactly the same length as the first 2. It's just instead of up here where we have the same 2 lines played, again, here it's something different. Now again, if you know the tune, or if you look at it here, you can see there's only a tiny difference here in this third part, and that's right here. That's the only difference between, we wrote out this third part in full just for that one reason. You think, well, why did they do that? Why, isn't there a way that we could save repeating this entire line, repeating all this stuff here because of that one bar being different? Sure, and that's what we have here, which is we've written our first ending and our second ending here. So I guess it's not even really a first ending because it's not at the end of the part. So here's our first part, here's our second part, here's our third part, and if you look at it closely, it's a little tiny one and a bracket that encloses this section here, and there's a little tiny 2 and a bracket that encloses this section. So the first time you play the third part, you're going to play along here, come down, play the number 1, skip the number 2, and then finish it. Then when you repeat, you play the first line, and then you skip the number 1, and you only play the number 2, and then you finish it. And then our fourth part will always be written out in full because it's a very cool part, but it's actually 4 completely different lines. So there's no shortcutting it. We just have to write it out in full. But this is actually quite rare to have, 2 brand new lines to finish up the part. Usually it's, just the ending like we had in Brown Hair Maid, or it's the, a little section here. The video you're watching was created for members of my bagpipelessons.com Inner Circle. With your membership in the Inner Circle, you get full access to the very best of everything at bagpipelessons.com. This includes weekly live interactive online classes for pipers of all skill levels, led by me and world champion guest instructors. You also get access to my exclusive lesson library, filled with hundreds of videos, lessons, tunes, exercises, demonstrations, and more, covering every topic in piping, from music theory to technique to tuning, maintenance, setup, and so much more. And you get personalized support from me to help you reach your piping goals. To find out more about joining my inner circle, please visit bagpipelessons.com/membership. Another thing to watch out for is just some of these older settings. So if you're used to reading pipe music that's been typeset on computer, they do a really nice job of, 4 bars in a line, 2 lines to a part, sort of every part always ends on the right margin of the page. It wasn't always like that. In fact, some of these older books, if you look at it, this is the same tune. Before computers, it was expensive to have something professionally typeset, and also every piece of paper in the book was expensive, so they tried to just cram things in as much as possible. So here's your first part, and actually your first part ends right there. So first part here, and then our second part starts here, kind of carries on, and sort of finishes there. Third part's here. There's our little variation in the third part, and then finally our fourth part starts here. So it's the exact same number of bars per part, 8 bars per part, played exactly the same way, but it's just a little bit confusing because it jumps around the page. I actually find this, I really like the typesetting in some of these old books. I think this might be Donald MacLeod books. I sort of like the font, and I like the boldness of the notes compared to some of the computer printing that we have today. But I do find it visually a little bit hard to decode. I think in terms of learning the tune, it makes it easier when you have visually the tune lining up 4 bars per line, and then your 2 lines give you your 8 bars per part. So sometimes I'll actually take this and rewrite it, or I haven't done this recently, but I used to actually take a photocopy and cut it up with scissors and tape and have it line up. Might seem a little bit obsessive, but I think just visually seeing it can sometimes help, so you're not trying to find where's the third part start, that you just know it always starts on the left side. So that's a jig. So going back to what we talked about before in terms of our sort of standard second ending, this is a 2/4 march called Greenwoodside. First part is just regular with repeats. So you can play the line 1, line 2, line 1, line 2, and then we have our second ending down here in the second part. But the reason I wanted to show you this is that the first ending actually starts right in the middle of this bar here. Well, why is that? Well, let's take a look. It's because from right there, it's sort of the 1, 2, 3, it's sort of in the middle of the second beat of that bar. And what it is that this D throw sort of fits in naturally with what comes next. If you look at the pickup notes here, sort of a D throw, E, and then it's an F is the first note of that full bar. Well, the same thing here. We're starting with the same F, so we want to have sort of the same pickup note. So it actually makes sense. It's just repeating that phrase there. However, on the second ending, the second ending really goes back up to the first part. If you look at this B, 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 G, D, E thing. So because it's the same thing down here, we actually want the pickup note to be the same. And that's how the tune's written. So the pickup note is the F. So they start that ending here right there. So you've got this last half of a beat is the first ending, and then on the second ending, you've got your F pickup note. So it all makes sense. It's just going back to that first part. The ending has to include the pickup notes. Now, what's interesting is that because this last line, the second ending, really goes back to the first part, they could have saved more space by crossing that whole thing out and just putting a second ending here and saying 2 of 2, which would mean second time of the second part. Again, we're just saving a little bit more ink, a little bit more space. I prefer that. I always prefer to have music that's written out with as little repetition as possible, just so it helps you understand, oh, well, this is not a new line. Just because there's 3 lines written out, you might think, oh, well, I've got to learn a new line now. No, it goes right back there. I think if they would have written it that way, it makes it a little bit clearer. This idea of having your first part sort of played regular with repeat, second part having a second ending where it goes back a part. You actually will see that a lot in pipe tunes, and that's why I want to show you this guy here, which is the Clan Macrae Society. And what's really interesting about it is if you look at these second endings, it has exactly what I just talked about. This is 2 of 2. So that means you're going to play this line the second time through the second part. You're not going to, it doesn't affect the first part. So line 1, line 2, let's just number all these. We have 12 lines. So the first part, we've got our repeats. It's going to be 1, 2, 1, 2. Second part is going to be 3, 4. But then it's going to be 3, and then we jump back up here to 2. So on the second time through the second part, we go back to the first part. Again, third part, same thing. So it's going to be 5, 6, 5, 6. Again, this is 2 of 4, which means it doesn't affect the third part. It's on the fourth part where we go 7, 8, 7, and then we pop back up 7, 6. So again, just like from the second part and the second time we went back a part to the first, same thing here. On the fourth part, second time, we go back to the third part. Again, and our pattern carries on. Our fifth part, 9, 10, 9, 10. Sixth part, 11, 12, 11, 10. So it drops back apart. So pretty cool. It sort of helps the whole tune hold together, especially when you get these tunes with lots and lots of parts. There's a lot of variation, so it's nice to come back and hear something that you've just played previously. One last thing I want to talk about repeats, and that goes back to what I talked about earlier, which is with our the types of tunes that get repeats. And I mentioned before that we repeat the parts in all of our tunes except our Strathspeys. So let's put this back up. Except Strathspeys and reels and 4/4s were the ones that we don't repeat the parts. So here we have John Roy Stewart, great traditional Strathspey. Here's our first part here. Again, no repeats because we don't repeat in Strathspeys, but still 8 bars for the part. Second part here. So if I say there's no repeats in Strathspeys, well, what are these repeat marks doing here? Well, it's because it's the same 4 bars played twice, and then our fourth part. So remember, all of our tunes have 8 bars per part. There's 4 and 4 makes 8, 4 and 4 makes 8, 4 and 4 makes 8 here in the third part. So it's just the same 4 played twice. And sometimes you'll see that written out in full, sometimes you'll see it written with a repeat mark here. It doesn't mean that it's half as long, it doesn't mean that this part is, quote, repeated. None of the parts are repeated, it just happens to be that this part is made up of the same 4 bars. Hope that makes sense, it's not too confusing. And the last one I wanted to show you is another great Strathspey by Donald MacPherson. Here's our first part. Again, it has the repeat marks because it's the same 4 played twice. There's our 8 bars. There's our same 4 played twice for 8. There's our same 4 played twice for 8. So again, so no repeats for Strathspeys and reels and 4/4s. And then everything else repeats. And that would be 2/4s, 3/4s, 6/8s, 9/8s, jigs, hornpipes. Forgetting anything else? Pretty much everything else. I don't know the historical reason for this over here, but I suspect the Strathspey and the reel has to do with the dance. So if you ever do piping for dancers, you will need to figure out the number of parts that you're going to be playing in a tune for the dancers, and their dances are in steps. So they'll do what they call a 4-step fling, or a 6-step Highland fling, or a 4-parted chanteuse, or a 4-parted hornpipe, or whatever. and what we call parts, they call steps. So you need to figure out, and I suspect it has to do with the number of steps lining up with the number of parts of the tune. Because if you're going to play a Strathspey for a Highland Fling, you do 4 parts of Strathspey equals 4 steps of Highland Fling. Whereas over here in the jig, if you're going to play for a Highland Dancer and it's 4 steps of jig, it's going to be 4 parts of jig with the repeats. So it's sort of like the how we play the tunes matches up with the Highland dance. So I'm not sure which came first, chicken and egg, but I suspect that these things sort of evolved with each other, over time. I don't know about 4/4 marches, but it might just be that 4/4s are already so long. They have twice as many beats as a 2/4. So if you repeated them, they may just sound really, really long. So I don't know the answer to that, but it's an interesting question. There you go. I hope that helps you understanding your repeats, when we repeat, maybe a little bit about why we repeat things, and also decoding our first and second endings in your sheet music. Good luck. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Or maybe you have a specific question about a particular tune, let me know. I'm happy to help. For more videos, lessons, and free guides, be sure to visit bagpipelessons.com/learn and download my free guide called Learn the Pipes Right. The link is in the description below. I'd love to be part of your piping journey. For more information on joining my bagpipelessons.com inner circle, please visit bagpipelessons.com/membership. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click the little bell to be notified when I post new things here on the bagpipelessons.com YouTube channel. Thank you and happy piping.